Hello, good evening. Welcome to Aro Ling Cardiff. This evening, Ngakpa ö-Dzin is teaching us about the Charnel Ground.
So welcome to chaos. I once read somewhere that in Britain, the chance of winning the lottery if you buy a ticket is not much different to the chance of winning the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. I looked it up, and the chance of winning the jackpot in the British lottery is 45 million to 1 against you if you have a ticket. And I was thinking that if you had those odds of a bus arriving, you wouldn't wait at the bus stop. 45 million to 1, you'd think that's not going to happen. And so your chance of winning the lottery with your ticket is about as near to nothing as you can get. So a lottery is all about chaos and unpredictability. And that made me think that the control that we have over events in general in our lives whilst we're alive is roughly the equivalent of the control we have over events when we're dead. It's about the same. It's pretty close to zero. Life is chaotic and unpredictable. We don't really know what's going to happen. And as soon as we start thinking about our area of control, we find it to be very small indeed. We don't know if the camera is going to work. We don't know if the recording is going to happen on Zoom. We don't know if things are suddenly going to cut out and stop. And things are chaotic and unpredictable, and even the things that are organized are not being organized by us necessarily. They're in somebody else's hands. So we don't have control over that. We don't have much control over anything beyond our hand span. And even that can be illusory. We don't have much control over what's in front of us. We don't have much control over what's inside us either. Our bodies are doing interesting and random things. And they're managing themselves to some degree. And as we get older, we find that weird stuff happens that didn't used to happen. And we've got no control over that either. So, as I say, the amount of control that we have over things in our lives whilst we're still alive and breathing is honestly not that much different to the amount of control we have when we're dead. So life is chaotic and unpredictable. So the teachings on the Charnel Ground are to do with seeing chaos as workable, because really chaos is what we've got to work with anyway. So we have to see it as workable, and dancing with unpredictability. So a brief sidestep into the what and where of the Charnel Ground. The Charnel Ground is basically a kind of cemetery, but unlike the neatly maintained Western cemetery, where the bodies are all very neatly arranged and at least 6 foot underground, or 2 meters for those of you working in metric, so that the lawns can be maintained around the graves. The Charnel Ground, or Dötro in Tibetan, are places where bodies are left above ground to decompose. So that they're all left there uncovered, regardless of the reasons for death. So there's going to be all sorts of interesting things going on. Not only are people rotting, but probably the diseases that killed them are flying around in that area as well. You've got hungry animals, because a piece of flesh is a piece of flesh, regardless of whether it's a human flesh or not, coming in to fight over these remains and scattering flesh and bones all over the place. And you've got various birds coming in trying to grab their share of whatever's going on, and squawking away with some entrails while various bits of blood and gore are dripping from the sky. It's a place of chaos, and it's on this edge. It's on the edge of life and death, because although it's a place of death, it's a really lively place as well. It's lively, colourful, noisy. There's a lot going on. So it's in this ground where you could say, well, is Charnel Ground about life or death? It's both. It's both happening all at the same time, and it's a place of chaos. Traditionally, there are 8 charnel grounds that are spoken of, which are at the cardinal points of the compass and the points in between. I don't know where they all are, even if they all still exist, but some are or were in India, Nepal, Zanskar, and even one in Java. So they were all out there. This was the method of getting rid of unwanted dead bodies right across the numerous Eastern countries at the time. For us as practitioners, well, I suppose I should say, yeah, I'll come to that. For us as practitioners, the charnel ground is an area of transition. It's a twilight zone, like the seashore, where there's an area of sand that is sometimes the sea and sometimes the land. Or if you go to the edge of a forest, you've got open ground, but the open ground is shaded by the branches that overhang it. So it's in the forest and not in the forest at the same time. So it's a transitional area. The charnel ground is a transition area between birth and death. And we as practitioners are transitional people, because we've got a foot in samsara and a foot in nirvana, shall we say. We are practitioners who are on that edge. Are we in the world? Are we out of the world? There's both going on there for anyone who's a practitioner of Vajrayana. Sometimes we appear to be part of the world and sometimes not. So you have an image here, the charnel ground as a powerful, colourful image of what it means to be a practitioner, what it means to play with ambiguity, what it means to play with form and emptiness, what it means to confuse form and emptiness completely, so we don't know which is the one and which is the other. And in fact, that's our life's work, is to confuse form and emptiness completely. Historically, the charnel ground was the home of the mahasidras, because they were twilight people, and they took up residence in the twilight zone, and they would live there and clothe themselves in the clothing of death. They would paint their bodies with the ashes from funeral pyres. They would wear the skins of dead creatures and make use of the bones of the dead for utensils and for instruments as well. So they were alive and practicing, but they practiced in and amongst all those who were already dead. And so this living beyond convention, living in this place that is neither life or death, but shares qualities of both of them, is the practice of essential Vajrayana. It's because it's the practice of transition, the practice of transition from who we think we are in terms of our lives, our emotions, our neuroses, and who we really are in terms of our liberated qualities. And we play backwards and forwards between these two. If we understand this, if we start to see our lives in these terms, then I think many things become workable. For some reason, something that was said by Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings occurred to me. The charnel ground is upon you, whether you would wish it or not. Really, seriously got no choice, because once we see this as being the nature of reality, and we can examine this as much as we would like to see how much control we have, how much of our lives is chaos, how much of our lives is dancing with chaos, then we realize that we are in the middle of the charnel ground. It is upon us. It's not some remote historical area. It's not something that happened way back in the past, some sort of quaint Eastern tradition of body disposal. It is our lives as we live them now. We have many examples in life of things that are alive and dead at the same time. An example might be divorce. Divorce is not the same as never having had a relationship, because the relationship continues. So it's both alive, but it's also dead. But there's still that relationship there, especially if there are children involved. You cannot just simply step away from it. The relationship is still there. We met somebody yesterday who I'd known at school, and hadn't seen him to speak to for maybe 20 years, maybe more. And so there was a relationship there. We knew each other, but we pretty much know nothing about each other as our lives are now. It was quite fortunate to see that he was gardening, so we had some point of contact. Otherwise, what is there? So there's a relationship, but it's not alive in the way it was when we were at school together, but it's not entirely dead either. It shares the qualities of both. In terms of our lives, we take responsibility for what happens around us as much as we can, knowing that we're not actually in control. So this is likened to a children's party, because there's going to be chaos there. You're going to have children running around and picking up crayons and maybe drawing on the walls or throwing jelly at each other. I don't know, all the things you can imagine in that sense of chaos. And you've got a choice. Are you going to squish that childish enjoyment by imposing a sense of order? You're going to let them run riot so that it is actually dangerous? Or you're going to stand in the middle of the chaos and just be present and be a guide really for what can happen in that place, without either letting it get completely out of control or stopping what's going on. This is how we are as practitioners in terms of our relationship with the world, in terms of our relationship with other people, that we're not imposing an order on what's happening, but we're not letting things get completely out of control either. And we know that however well we do in that situation, a certain level of failure is also a likely occurrence. So we take responsibility, but we don't expect reliability from anything that's around us, particularly. Ngakpa Rinpoche said this is a relaxed condition. I think that speaks of the nature of Ngakpa Rinpoche more than necessarily the nature that we find ourselves in. But if you can have that combination of responsibility with lack of expectation, it could possibly be a relaxed condition to be in. We live in the charnel ground. We do our best in the charnel ground, knowing that failure is always a distinct possibility. So we have to dance with our situation. We can enact attempts at control of the situation, but we're not attached to the outcome. So we've got this ambiguity happening all the time. How much can I control? What needs to be controlled? What could be controlled? How much do I let things happen? So there's a sense of overall responsibility, a sense of knowing that there's going to be failure, knowing that if we try to fall too much on the side of form, there'll be an error. If we try to fall too much on the side of emptiness, there will be an error. And taking a path right down the middle and being one with the non-duality of the situation is like dancing on the head of a pin. So there's also a need to find our failures amusing. Rinpoche likened this to having a comb over to hide thinning hair. I don't know whether people still do that, but I've seen videos of people on television who've tried to comb their hair over to make it look like they still had hair, and then the wind blows and this stray bit of hair is doing whatever it wants to do. Or having a facelift to try and appear younger, but eventually you can't fight that. Failure in these terms is just reality manifesting itself, and whatever it is we've attempted to do, we have to have a sense of humor about the failure to enable all of that to happen. There's a recommendation here to visit places that are chaotic, or visit places that certainly seem chaotic to us. So if you've ever been to India, it's a really good example of what at least appears to be chaos to us. I don't know what it appears to somebody who was brought up in that situation, but you know that if the bus is supposed to pick you up at 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock is maybe not. In my case, it was 11 o'clock at night. In Rinpoche's case, he waited for a train for 3 days, and spoke to the station master, who said, yes, coming soon, and it was always coming soon. Had he known exactly when it was going to come, he'd have made other plans and been back at the station in time, but it doesn't work that way. So there seem to be places where chaos is normal. Ngakma Nor'dzin has stories to tell about how things work in India as well, that you could be in a taxi and it will stop for no particular reason, or it will have a tire blowout and they'll just be waiting while something happens, or somebody will go off and maybe have a meal somewhere and come back with the tire a bit later. And in her case, a passing sitter came along and helped lift the car while they put the new wheel on, and off they went again. But that whole process took hours and hours, whereas in life in the West, we tend to expect things to happen a bit more snappily than that. So there's a sense, if we go to these places, that we don't understand what's happening, but things seem to be able to happen at their own pace and in their own way. So there's something to be learned from the apparent chaos of the situation. I'm still not sure what side of the road people are supposed to drive on in India, because they seem to be doing both. And sometimes it depended on where a cow was. It's all quite different. But eventually you get where you're going. Oh, one thing to say about that, don't get on a train in India and say, is this train going to Delhi? Because everyone will want you to be happy and say, yes, going to Delhi. You have to say, where is this train going? You have to ask them to tell you. So we make a vow to live in the charnel ground. We've already said it's inescapable, so we might as well make a vow to live in the charnel ground. This is where we are anyway. And whenever something is happening that we don't like, we deliberately remind ourselves that we chose this. We chose to live in the charnel ground. We've made a vow to live in the charnel ground. We've made a vow to see our lives in that way and deal with things as they occur. So we can still take action as best we can and with our best intention. We can still complain. This is wonderful. So we can still rant about cars parked on the pavement if we want to, but we have a sense of humor about it, hopefully, and not be attached to the outcome, not be attached to anything changing. If I had to impose my will on all the drivers around here, it would be a full-time job. And I don't think they'd listen to me anyway. So whatever's going on, there is still this chaos. There's still things that you think could be improved, but our scope of activity for improving anything is severely limited, and we do what we can. Despite our best abilities, the garden keeps growing in whatever way it wants to. You'll have to go out and give it a good talking to from time to time, but it'll still do what it wants. Mm-hmm. So we're effectively the modern mahasidras. We're the modern mahasidras because, like them, we live outside of social convention, because Buddhism is our primary reference point, not social convention. If we've taken vows, that's where we look for advice in terms of what we should be doing. We look to practice, we look to our lamas, we look to the Sangha, we look to the teachings. So we might appear to be part of social convention. We tend to wear fairly normal clothes when we're out and about, but internally, we're not. Internally, we are practitioners, and sometimes externally so as well. So what we do is linked first and foremost to practice. How we look at the world and how we interpret the world and how we respond to the world is based in practice. Other considerations come second. This also means that it's possible to live life as an art form. If you feel so moved to wear interesting and apparently outlandish clothing, why not do that? Why not? Why feel restricted by whatever's currently in fashion? You can actually go and do that and make that happen. So being able to break with convention is part of things being a charnel ground. Wearing a Stetson in Wales, as I've heard that sometimes happens, or if you wanted to, you could wear your wedding outfit as normal clothing. Why not? So you're then free. Once we accept the fact that we're in a charnel ground, it actually brings on a sense of freedom, because we're no longer trying to control everything, because we know it's not controllable. So it actually provides space in which to live, rather than living within the restrictions of social convention, or the restrictions of trying to keep everything under control. So you're then free to live life as if it were an art form. So the charnel ground in terms of refuge is the refuge of no refuge. It's the refuge of being able to live in the chaos of things as they are. It's the refuge in as it is. So we recognize chaos, and we recognize chaos as workable. We accept the situation as it is without looking to make ground from it, because it's the ground of emptiness and form. So we have the ground, it's entirely reliable, as long as we don't want that ground to be completely form. And that's a stable place from which we can help others find ground that they need, because we need none of our own. And kindness is always possible. There was a science fiction author, or maybe still is a science fiction author, Alan Dean Foster, who said, "Freedom is just chaos with better lighting." So what we're doing is we're actually taking the chaos of life, but we're lighting it in terms of Dharma. And that enables us to see chaos in quite a different way, in quite a different sense. And what we have here are the 3 terrible oaths of Dorje Trolle. Whatever happens, may it happen. Whichever way it goes, may it go that way. There is no purpose. And this is positively willing everything to be just as it is. And that enables us to stand heroically or otherwise in the chaos of the charnel ground. I've got a quote here from Ngakpa Rinpoche on the subject of the 3 terrible oaths. They place the practitioner entirely within his or her own situation, and there's no nicer world to which we can retreat. There's just the world that we have as it is. Whatever happens, may it happen, means we don't make attempts at surreptitious deals with reality to create a situation in which we live happily ever after. Whichever way it goes means that when we fall from the towering cliff of birth, we don't pretend that the end result isn't death. There is no purpose simply means that there's no overriding purpose, overarching inclusive purpose to which we must adhere. Reality is the dance of emptiness and form. So purposes will arise and dissolve along with emptiness and form. Purposes will occur from time to time, but there's nothing overriding to which we have to stick rigidly, and there's no guarantee of anything. If there were a purpose, then you'd stick to it and you know that you were working out that purpose. There isn't one. And so we have to have awareness of recognizing purposes when they occur, and recognizing where we can act and where we can be of help to people. So this is the practice of Yang Sang Chud, to enter into chaos, to be engaged in chaos, and not to be half-hearted about it. So we acknowledge that our life, the space of our life, is the charnel ground. We enter into the chaos. We don't passively retract from it. There's no escape. So why would we do that? There's no purpose in that. And we remain engaged, we remain present, knowing that we're not in control either, or our control is quite limited. We're not attached to action, but we're not half-hearted about our actions. So we enter into it to the best of our ability, knowing that failure is always a possibility. So coming back to the idea of accepting and embracing this chaos gives us space and gives us freedom of action because we know that there isn't an order. We know that there is chaos. We know that things come and go. We know there's success and failure. We know that some things get better, some things get worse. And we act within that space to the best of our ability. So we have a practice here. The practice of Yang Sang Chud is the practice of naming everything deliberately as the charnel ground. That is our situation. And we realize we have no choice but to be in that situation. We recognize the dance of emptiness and form. We recognize that any sense of control is an illusion. And it's like holding our lottery ticket. Any sense of the possibility of winning is an illusion. And once we realize we have no control over the situation, we're completely free as practitioners. We're completely free to act in that space. And what can we do? We can be present, we can be open, and we can be kind. And this is our life as practitioners within the space of the charnel ground.
I think this is such a great teaching to remember all the time. I'm very aware of the times when I forget that I'm in the charnel ground because I feel unhappy and I lose my sense of humor. And even being a practitioner for 40 years or more, it still happens. I think I notice it more quickly, but it's so useful to be reminded of this. And if you've lost your sense of humor, then I think you're trying to control something.
I think that is so true. I think it's good to have a reminder at the beginning and then reminders during the course of our lives, because it seems quite easy to forget things. And so yes, I think, as you say, if we don't seem to have a sense of humor about stuff, then we need to get back to that.
So that was a brilliant reminder. Thank you very much.
Thank you.